Okay, this hearing of the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission will come to order. It is October 26, 2011. The time is 6:02 p.m. We are on the record. We are in Mesa, Arizona. Won't you all rise with me and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? Well, thank you all for coming tonight. Tonight's hearing is a part of round 2 of the Commission's public comment hearings. The Commission has published 2 maps, a draft congressional map and a draft legislative map. The purpose of these public comment hearings is to get your input on these maps. We want to hear what you have to say. If you'd like to address the Commission later, please go ahead and fill out one of these yellow request to speak forms. You'll find them in the back. You can give them to any one of our staff, and you'll be able to speak. Before we get too much farther, I want to ask our translator, Carlos Rejas, to come to the microphone. He is going to read an announcement in English and in Spanish. To comply with federal law, the Commission is required to make translation services available, so I'll turn it over to Carlos.
Thank you, Chair Freeman. Ladies and gentlemen, commissioners, in accordance with the Voting Rights Act, a translator and/or interpreter will be available at the public hearings in order to provide translating and interpreting services that might be needed. For those citizens that need translating and interpreting services, please contact the translator and/or interpreter present at this meeting so that he or she can assist you. Now, I will read the script in Spanish. Vicepresidente Freeman, comisionados, damas y caballeros, de acuerdo a la Ley de los Derechos Electorales, un traductor e intérprete estará disponible en todas las reuniones de audiencia pública a fin de proporcionar la interpretación que pueda ser necesaria para los ciudadanos que necesiten servicios de interpretación o traducción. Si necesita la asistencia de un intérprete, por favor, comuníquese conmigo. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rejas. My name is Scott Freeman. I'm one of the 5 commissioners on the Independent Redistricting Commission. As part of these public comment hearings, we're doing about 26, 27 of them across the state over about a 3-week period. So the individual commissioners are sort of dividing the duties in pairs or single commissioners, or even 3, I think we've had at one hearing, are sort of dividing up the state and attending these hearings. All of our hearings are live streamed when that capability is available to us. So I know the other commissioners, our chair, Colleen Mathis, our other vice chair, Jose Herrera, Commissioner McNulty and Commissioner Sturts are watching these proceedings online and listening to what you're saying tonight. I'd like to introduce a few other people as part of the commission. To my right is legal counsel for the commission, Joe Canfield. We have our mapping consultant, Corinne Bielak, is here as well. She's going to have a brief presentation about redistricting that she'll present to you in a moment. We also have our Assistant Executive Director, Christina Gomez, in the back. We have one of our outreach coordinators, Leisha Schmeling, is in the back with the forms. Buck Forrest, our Chief Technology Advisor, Chief Technology Expert, is manning the live stream. And everything that is being said here tonight is being taken down by our court reporter, Marty Herder. Let's make sure I've covered everything. Again, the yellow requests to speak forms are in the back. You'll also see in the back a packet that begins with a cover letter by the chair, and it has some of the maps printed out, including it. At the back of the packet, you'll see a blue comment form. If you don't want to speak tonight but would rather submit your comments in writing, I encourage you to go ahead and fill out this form. You can fill it out tonight and submit it to any member of our staff, or you can take it home and mail it into the commission. The commission also has a website, azredistricting.org, and on that website there is the ability to leave comments through the website, or you can call the commission on the phone numbers available, also available on the website. With that, I'm going to turn the program over to Ms. Bielak, who's got a presentation about the redistricting process.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Corinne Kabina Bilak with Strategic Telemetry. I'm happy to be here this evening in Mesa to discuss the draft congressional and legislative maps presented by the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission. So the goal of these meetings, of course, is to hear comments from you. So thank you for taking the time to attend this evening. The draft maps you will see today are currently under a 30-day review period so that the commission can hear your opinion about these maps. So before I get into the maps, I just want to give you a quick overview of the redistricting process. Arizona's redistricting process is governed by the state constitution as amended by voters in 2000 with the passage of Proposition 106. It stipulates that Arizona's Independent Redistricting Commission redraw Arizona's congressional and legislative districts to reflect the most recent census results. So due to the 2010 census, Arizona gained a congressional seat going from 8 seats to 9 seats. So what are the requirements of the state constitution via Prop 106? The new district boundaries must comply with the U.S. Constitution and the Voting Rights Act, and they must have equal population, and criteria A and B are federally mandated. And then to the extent practicable, the districts must be compact and contiguous, respect communities of interest, use visible geographic features, city, town, and county boundaries, and undivided census tracts, and favor competitive districts where no significant detriment to other goals. So just a little bit about the Voting Rights Act in particular. Arizona's congressional and legislative districts must receive pre-clearance or approval from the Department of Justice or a federal court under Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act before they can take effect. To get pre-clearance, Arizona must demonstrate that the new districts do not discriminate in purpose against minority voters in purpose or effect, which means there can be no intentional or accidental discrimination. Under Section 5, Arizona's redistricting plans cannot be retrogressive. The plans cannot weaken or reduce minority voters' rights. And the presence of discrimination can be determined by analyzing population data and election results. So quickly, just want to show you a quick video from Bruce Adelson, who's been advising the commission on matters related to the Voting Rights Act and pre-clearance. So just to go into that video now.
Hello, my name is Bruce Adelson. I wanted to spend a few moments with you to talk a little bit about redistricting. I was a senior attorney for the United States Department of Justice in 2002 when the department and my team objected to or blocked your legislative redistricting plan. It's very important to understand that under Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which is a federal law, Arizona must obtain approval or pre-clearance from the Department of Justice or from a federal court in Washington, D.C. for your redistricting plan to go into effect. Under Section 5, under federal law, your redistricting plan cannot discriminate against the rights of minority voters. It cannot retrogress their opportunity to elect whom they want. This is a federal requirement. The federal requirement supersedes and takes precedence over all state requirements, whether they're competitiveness, compactness, contiguity, or keeping communities of interest together. Those are all very important. But if they conflict with the Voting Rights Act and conflict with the one person, one vote requirement of the U.S. Constitution, then they must be revised. The requirements of the Voting Rights Act and one person, one vote are paramount. There cannot be any retrogression or discrimination against the rights of minority voters. If there is, the Department of Justice will not approve the redistricting plan. That's what we said when we wrote our letter in May 2002, and we objected to what the Redistricting Commission 9 years ago had done. We found that the redistricting plan, the legislative plan, had discriminated against the rights of minority voters. And under federal law, that plan could not go into effect. So that as you contemplate redistricting and look at the various maps that have been provided by the commission, it's very important to understand that the federal requirements under our system of law and government take priority. Those requirements cannot be minimized and must be complied with for your redistricting plan to go into effect next year to enable you to have your legislative and congressional elections. I hope that my perspective as being a former federal law enforcement officer has been helpful, and I wish you continued success with your redistricting process. Thank you.
Great, so we'll just move back into the presentation very quickly. Give me one moment here to move this over. Okay, so moving on to the timeline for the commission. So the overall timeline for the redistricting process can be broken down into 5 steps. Earlier this year, step 1, the commission was established, and the commissioners were appointed following a thorough screening process and serve in a voluntary role for the state of Arizona. Of course, tonight we have Vice Chair Scott Freeman, and also on the commission, Jose Herrera, Vice Chair, Chairman Colleen Mathis, Linda McNulty, and Richard Sturts. The second round, the second step was the first round of public hearings. So before drawing a single line, the commission held 23 public hearings in the months of July and August around the state to get input from members of the public on issues about the redistricting process, such as geography, communities of interest, minority voting rights, and competitiveness. Then the mapping process actually began. So per Proposition 106, the commission started with the blank slate, which we'll talk a little bit more when we see the maps. They then divided the state into equal population and compact grid-like districts and approved a grid map on August 18th. And since adopting the grid map, the commission has met more than 25 times to consider adjustments to the grid to accommodate all 6 of the constitutional criteria. During this time, they also received additional public comment and draft maps from the public. Then became the approval of the draft maps. So on October 3rd, the commission approved a draft congressional map that incorporated changes based on the constitutional criteria. They then approved a draft legislative map on October 10th. Which brings us to step 4, which is the second round of public hearings, which we're going through now. So currently, the commission's visiting 25 towns and cities to share the draft maps and to receive additional public input during the months of October and November. Step 5 is with the approval of the final maps. Upon completion of a public comment period, the AIRC will adopt the final maps. And then step 6, which Bruce Adelson spoke about also, is the pre-clearance process. So because Arizona is subject to Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, the district maps must be approved by the Federal Department of Justice or the federal court in Washington, D.C. before they can be used in Arizona elections. So now moving on to the maps. To show you how the commission came to the current draft maps, I'm going to go through the progression of the mapping process. So the map that you see here on the screen is the congressional map that was approved by the last redistricting commission. It was most recently used in the 2010 election. Then, as I touched on earlier, the blank slate map. So per Proposition 106, the commission was required to start with a blank slate, not taking into consideration any previous election districts or incumbents. Which brought us to the congressional grid map. Again, also per Proposition 106, the commission started with a grid map. However, the grid map only takes into consideration 2 of the 6 constitutional criteria, equal population and compactness. So in August, the commission asked that 2 grid maps be drawn, and on August 18th, they agreed on option 2, which is the version that you see on the screen here. So after more than the 25 meetings, the commission voted to approve the draft map that's now on the screen, the draft congressional map. In addition to taking into the 6 constitutional criteria, the commission took into consideration public comment that was provided via public hearings, public meetings, round 1 of the public hearings, comments mailed, emailed, telephone, faxed, any communication that came into the commission about changes to these maps or recommendations. So over 5,000 comments in total helped to develop the draft map, which you see here. And to go through a couple of the highlights for you of this map. The draft congressional map includes 2 predominantly rural districts. It includes 3 border districts. It includes 3 districts in the greater Tucson region, 5 districts that are entirely in Maricopa County. It avoids splitting Arizona's Indian reservations, and it creates 2 districts where minority voters have an opportunity to elect a candidate of choice. So now just moving into the legislative maps. So much like the congressional draft map, developing the legislative maps followed a very similar process. So here we see the legislative map that was last used, that was developed by the last commission and was last used in the 2010 elections. Again, per Proposition 106, the commission started with a blank slate, and a grid map was approved in August, which is on the screen now. So similar to the congressional map, the grid map only took into consideration equal population and compactness, which leads us to the legislative draft map. Arizona has 30 legislative districts, and each district elects 1 senator and 2 House members. So some points about the legislative draft map to share with you today. So the commission took into consideration population growth and reduction. So in the old districts, the population ranged from 155,000 to 378,000. In the current draft, the population ranges from 207,000 to 215,000. So to comply with the Voting Rights Act, the draft map also includes 10 districts in which minority voters should have an opportunity to elect a candidate of choice. And then this draft legislative map includes 3 districts wholly within Pima County and 3 additional southern Arizona districts. It includes 17 districts primarily within Maricopa County and 9 districts that are primarily rural. So again, one of the most important reasons for these meetings are so that the AIRC can get your input. A couple ways you can do that. You can fill out a request to speak form at a public hearing and provide the commission with your input. Examples of your input might include anything from thoughts on constitutional criteria to specific suggestions for the draft congressional and legislative maps. You can also submit your input by speaking at a hearing, filling out a public input form at a hearing, or on the AIRC website, which I'll show you in a bit. And you can also visit the azredistricting.org, which is the AIRC's website, and submit public input that way, of course. And you can call 602-542-5221 or toll free at 855-733-7478. You can also phone in your input. So want to give you all of those options. Another important part of this process is that you can stay connected throughout the redistricting process. So what you see on the screen here is a screenshot of the commission's website. The arrows here highlight a couple key areas that you might be interested in. So one, you can find meetings on the website. So the red arrow shows you here. You can basically find future and past meetings, and in case you'd like to watch any of the deliberation that went into drawing the draft maps, you can find meetings by date under this link. You can also make public comments, which is the public input form link, which shows you where that link is. And then finally, you see 2 arrows for maps. The one at the top takes you to the maps, but tonight I'm going to talk about the arrow at the bottom, which takes you to the same page, basically. So if you click on the link there, the screen that will come up is this screen here, which basically is a listing of the congressional and legislative maps in different file types. So something like a JPEG or a PDF, basically just different file types. But tonight, to talk about one specific type of file, which is the KMZ Google Map file. If you click on the red circle here, or the link to the red circle here for Google Maps, you're brought up to this slide here, which is viewing the KMZ Google Map. So of course, most people are interested in viewing these draft maps. And once you click on the map, you'll see the menu of choices and you're brought to this screen. The great thing about the Google Maps is that you can zoom in and out to specific areas that you're interested in, which gives you a great opportunity to view down to specific blocks and boundaries of these maps. So just to take you through what's shown on the left side here in the screen, those are a series of filters that you can click on and off of to highlight different areas of the maps. So for example, you can click on and off counties or on and off population, basically gives you population data here, but on and off different districts, and also on and off, you can click on and off colors, which allows you to just better view the maps. So that's worth noting on the side here. So now, what you see, of course, is a zoomed out version of the congressional map. And if you zoom in, this slide shows you a zoomed in look on some of the areas surrounding Maricopa County. Again, just noting you have the ability to zoom in and out down to viewing street names and blocks. So it's a really great way to view the maps. So as I wrap this up, I just want to highlight the Commission's website for you one more time. It's azredistricting.org. Again, at the website, you can draw maps of your own. You can watch current or past meetings and get updates about future meetings as well. If you're into social media, I encourage you to follow us on Twitter at the hashtag AIRC, and you can also friend the commission on Facebook, and you'll get up-to-the-minute updates through both of those social media mediums as well. And that is the end of the slide. But again, thank you for coming out this evening and being a part of this process with the commission. A final point on these maps, just to note, copies of these maps can be found in the packets that you received this evening. And we also have large blown up copies of the maps on the walls in the back of the room, which are a great way to view the different areas. Also, I'm available after the public comment period should you have any questions regarding the mapping process or any advice, about accessing the maps or questions about that as well. And then, of course, the staff is available to help you if you have any questions regarding how to find the maps or anything along those lines. So I look forward to speaking with you this evening, and thank you for having us here.
Thank you, Ms. Belak. We'll now turn to the public comment portion of the program. In providing comments, whether you do it at the microphone or in writing, the more specific you can be about the maps, what you like about the maps, what you don't like about the maps, is very helpful to the commission. If you have specific changes you'd like to see, please lay them out. If you've thought about the next step and how other districts might need to be adjusted to accommodate the change you would like, even better. Once again, if you'd like to speak to address the commission, the yellow request to speak forms are in the back. We also have the blue forms. You can submit them in writing. If you brought written materials or maps that you'd like to submit to the commission, please submit them to any member of our staff. They will get them to the commissioners, and they'll become part of our record. Right now, I think I have about 10 requests to speak forms. So I think going forward, I'd ask that if you're speaking, to try to limit your comments to 5 minutes, and we'll keep a timer on that. If you hear Mr. Forrest, we'll keep the timer. When you hear the chime or whatever it is, the buzzer, don't feel you have to end your comments immediately, but please try to sort of wrap up your thoughts so we're fair to everyone else who has come and make sure everyone else has a chance to speak. When I call your name, please come up to the microphone. Don't be shy about wrestling with it, because we need you to speak right into it so the people in the back will hear and so people on the live stream will hear as well. Please state your name and spell your name so Mr. Herter has an accurate record of who you are. And if I haven't mentioned who you stated on your form, who you're here representing, or where you're from, please go ahead and add that. And when you say where you're from, what we're looking for is not a street address. We're not looking for that, but a city or county where you're from. So with that, I'll invite our first speaker, Lynn Pencrazy, who is state representative from the former District 24 from Yuma, representing her constituents.
Good evening. You look lost by yourself up there, but nice to see you again. I am here, as I was in 3 other meetings, to let you know that rural Arizona would like to stay rural and does not want to be attached to Surprise, Litchfield Park, and all of Glendale and Avondale and all the places that belong to Maricopa County. We are very concerned about losing our rural voice, and also the fact that Yuma County has been a competitive district in the past. Let's put it this way, District 24 has been a competitive district in the past, and we'd like to remain a competitive district. We'd also like to remain all of Yuma County and all of La Paz County, if that is at all possible. If not, and we do need to split for some reason because of federal requirements, La Paz County has been with Yuma County as part of Yuma County and then as La Paz County from its very existence. And we know the issues there. We connect really well together, and we represent La Paz County very well and would like to have La Paz County connected to Yuma County and not to the Mojave District. I understand the Strip wants to come down to Mojave County. That would allow La Paz County to come out of that and be able to go with Yuma County in District 13 if at all possible. But if if it's possible and we can do that, Yuma County wants to remain whole. So that's what I'm here for, and you've heard me before, but I'm asking you again and again until you get tired of seeing me here to please keep Yuma intact, Yuma County intact, and keep La Paz County with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next will be Jen Daniels, Vice Mayor, Town of Gilbert. Representing the Town of Gilbert and from Gilbert.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Freeman. My name is Jen Daniels, Jennndaniels. I am the Vice Mayor from the Town of Gilbert, and I am here representing the Council. While we very much appreciate the difficult nature of your work, the Town of Gilbert was disappointed to see the IRC's draft legislative map that was adopted for consideration. The IRC's proposed map clearly contradicts the town's expressed preference and legitimate need for stronger representation in the Arizona State Legislature. On October 6, 2011, the Gilbert Town Council unanimously passed a resolution supporting IRC proposed map, Legislative 9 Minority District Option 1, Version 8A. And we respectfully requested the IRC to honor the Town of Gilbert's input into its creation of legislative districts. Your vote, however, approved a legislative map that places the bulk of Gilbert into one single legislative district, at the same time alienating a small sliver of our town by placing it into another district where our residents will be grossly outnumbered by residents of a neighboring municipality. Under the IRC's map, these residents will be harmed by being effectively disenfranchised. The Town of Gilbert, despite our town designation, we are 74 square miles and 209,000 citizens strong. We represent the fastest growing region of the Phoenix metropolitan area, and despite the downturn of the economy, Gilbert maintains steady rates of growth that surpass any city in the state. Again, by placing the vast majority of Gilbert into one legislative district, the IRC has effectively diluted the representation of Gilbert residents at the Arizona State Legislature and done harm to the one man, one vote principle. If the IRC's proposed legislative map is formally adopted, it is important for this commission to know that within just a few short years, Gilbert's population will render its one legislative district substantially overpopulated and severely underrepresented. The consequences of this is that Gilbert residents will have to endure 10 long years of underrepresentation. In light of these facts, the Town of Gilbert respectfully asks the distinguished members of this commission to understand that its adopted draft map is not in the best interest of the town or its residents. The Town of Gilbert supports the concept of two strong legislative districts for the town as embodied in the IRC's originally proposed map, Legislative 9 Minority District Version 8A. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Larry Alderman, Globe City Councilman, representing rural Eastern Arizona from Globe.
Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. Superior Mayor Hing was supposed to speak tonight on behalf of rural Eastern Arizona. However, his father was hospitalized just hours ago, and I was asked to fill in for him. And unfortunately, I grabbed the wrong stack of papers. But as you know, we have submitted maps for rural Arizona, rural Eastern Arizona. We have joined with other citizens of governments of Eastern and rural Arizona in urging the Commission to keep the congressional representation of this region solely rural and undivided. If you'll notice that your maps divides specifically Gila County into 3 different sections, which is unacceptable. We also, in rural Arizona, have some common interest, and that's mining, ranching, timber, and tourism. We would like to have that recognized as things that we have in common. And also, I would also like to bring to your attention that we now have 12 cities who have adopted resolutions supporting rural eastern Arizona and keeping it together. The last two, last night, the city of Winslow and the town of Snowflake adopted a resolution. And as you know, we are a representative type of government. Unfortunately, everyone from our communities, and they are widespread, are unable to come to these meetings. So we, as representatives of those people, speak on their behalf. There hasn't been any opposition to the resolutions that we have all passed supporting rural Arizona. I would like to remind you that the city of Winslow has a total of 9,655 signatures by virtue of that resolution. The town of Snowflake has 5,590 signatures tagged with that. I would also like to let you know that St. John's and Camp Verde have a resolution on the table for tonight, and they will probably pass as well without any opposition. We are fundamentally alike in all aspects of what your requirements for the redistricting process is. We are a little bit on the heavy side as far as minority representation. We have more minority representation in our rural Arizona. And we also have, we're right at 54 short of having the exact amount of people represented in that district, or in that rural Arizona coalition. I would just like to ask you to be mindful that each one of those resolutions carry a number of individuals that we represent. Most of those people, I have 1,200 people that I represent. I deal with them on a daily basis. I interact with them. I know what their desires are, and I try to serve that. If you take $36.15 away from my pay every payday twice a month, I will have to pay to serve them, which I would gladly do. I believe that in these rural communities, as well as the bigger communities, we on the front line, or the grassroots, feel the same way. We are here to serve, and we feel that our interests would be better served with a rural Arizona as it is mapped out, and it doesn't cut counties up, and it represents all the people and meets all the right criteria for redistricting process. And that's about all I've got to say. Do you have any questions for me?
Thank you, Councilman Alderman, and please extend the commission's sympathies to Mayor Hing. I had an opportunity to meet him when we were up in Globe recently. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. God bless.
Next will be Douglas Coleman, Councilman, City of Apache Junction, representing Apache Junction for Pinal County.
Hello, Vice Chair Freeman. I'm Douglas Coleman, D-O-U-G-L-A-S-C-O-L-E-M-A-N, and I am here representing Apache Junction. I need to tell you that our council discussed the proposed maps, and I differ from the majority of our council. I think the other 6 members all felt that on the legislative district that we should stay in Pinal County and should be in Pinal County, and so that the legislative district should stop at the county line and go further east. I actually like the compactness of proposed legislative district 16. I think it's far better than what we have been operating under the last 10 years, where I live in a little finger that connects me with Gilbert, whereas the rest of my community is in District 23. So I like that, but like I say, that if I'm representing the council, I need to tell you that the majority, in fact all 6 of the rest of the council, feels that we need to be in Pinal County exclusively. The main problem that all of us have, though, is with the congressional district, and I believe that I'm the third council person to come before the commission and testify. We have concerns about the compactness and the communities of interest and the geographic features. We are in Congressional District 4, proposed Congressional District 4, which is the River Cities communities, or the Superstition Mountains. We'd have to go through 3 other congressional districts to get to the other population areas of our own district. There's no way, well, I guess we could go up through Globe and around through Payson and around, I don't know how we'd get there. But to get to Bullhead City, for example, we have nothing in common. We do support the map that the Pinal County Governmental Alliance proposed, and I will give this to your staff. We feel that it better suits our needs, that it keeps us with regions of which we share common interests. And so we would ask that on the congressional district side that the commission take a look at that. We're part of that claw that comes down and around Mesa, which we just feel is unfair and will make it so that we don't really have a voice, we feel. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next is Robin Benning, Council Member, Town of Queen Creek.
Good evening, Vice Chairman Freeman and other members of the commission who are probably watching right now. For the record, my name is Robin Benning, B-E-N-N-I-N-G. I am a council member representing the town of Queen Creek. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for a chance to share the Queen Creek Town Council's thoughts on the proposed congressional and legislative district maps. The town is focused on 2 primary issues with regard to redistricting. First and foremost, we believe that the entire town should be included in only 1 congressional and only 1 legislative district. Queen Creek is a small town of approximately 26 square miles with 27,000 residents. We're unique in that the town falls for the majority in Maricopa, but we do have some area within Pinal County. Even though our geographic boundaries cross the county line, our residents share a strong sense of community. They do not see themselves as Maricopa or Pinal County residents, but rather see themselves as residents of Queen Creek. Unlike some other cities and towns looking to increase their representation, the town council feels strongly that they cannot support districts which would split our town into more than 1 congressional or legislative district. That would in turn split our residents and cause great pain and anxiety. The second key issue for our town is that the town be located in a urbanized district. Queen Creek, for the most part, falls into a friendly relationship with both the urbanized county of Maricopa as well as the more rural county of Pinal. However, our alignment is and our partnerships are stronger in relation to the urbanized county. The mayor has sent several letters to the commission explaining the town's community of interest is with Maricopa County because we partner with our neighboring communities and jurisdictions to deliver many of the services that our residents demand. Unfortunately, both the proposed congressional and legislative maps divide the town along the county line. This is a problem for us, so the town council respectfully asks that the commission consider amending the maps to move the entire town into Congressional District 5 and Legislative District 12. We really do not want our town to be divided. I want to thank you again for the opportunity to speak, and on behalf of the mayor and my fellow council members, I sincerely hope that you can consider revising the maps to include the town in 1 congressional district and 1 legislative district. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Mayor Jay Schlum, Mayor of Fountain Hills.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thanks Commissioners and staff for doing an important job, and I know not an easy one. We have forwarded a resolution signed off by our council, Town of Fountain Hills, and our staff, our citizens have voiced a lot of concern with the congressional district, and that's what I'm here to speak about tonight. We forwarded the resolution number 2011-45 to your attention. It's signed. I'll leave a copy as well tonight. We are urging the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission to reconsider its determination regarding placement of the Town of Fountain Hills on the finalized Draft 6 Congressional District map. Obviously, you know, on October 10th, you've adopted that map, which has 9 congressional districts. And the draft map shows Fountain Hills in Congressional District 4, while surrounding communities of interest, including the city of Scottsdale, Fort McDowell, Yavapai Nation, Salt River Pima Indian Community, all surrounding communities of ours, actually all attached to us. They are our neighbors, all in a different district, District number 6. The town and the surrounding communities of interest have very strong ties with one another, and in many respects, including joint cooperation and coordination of fire and emergency medical services. The town and Fort McDowell jointly promote town's funding and tourism efforts through a common tourism bureau and various other events, and the economies of the town and Fort McDowell are inextricably linked. The town and Fort McDowell share a common school district, and the children of both communities share many of the same schools. The town and the surrounding communities often share common interests with respect to major infrastructure projects, which projects often require the communities to work cooperatively through regional and federal transportation agencies, which cooperation will be severely hampered if the town is located in District 4. The current boundaries between District 4 and 6 divide these tightly bound communities of interest into separate congressional districts, splintering representation of the town and aligning it with rural Arizona communities with whom it has very few common interests, and in some cases placing it at odds with communities in District 4 when urban metro areas of interest collide with the interests of rural Arizona communities. The shape is extremely diverse, and the remote geographical locations of the major population centers of the proposed District 4 creates substantial difficulties for a representative elected from one portion of the district to be familiar with or even physically reach the other areas of the district. And the unique physical landforms around the town give it particularly intimate relationship with the surrounding communities, particularly with respect to the interconnected open spaces and recreational facilities. Come again? You bet, thanks. The shape and extremely diverse and remote geographical locations of the major population centers of the proposed District 4 creates substantial difficulties for a representative elected from one portion of the district to be familiar with or even physically reach the other areas of the district. The unique physical landforms around the town give it a particular intimate relationship with surrounding communities, particularly with respect to the interconnected open space and recreational facilities. The boundaries of District 4 and District 6 on the map, if left unchanged with respect to the town, may cause irreparable damage to the decades of cooperative efforts between the town and surrounding communities. So the mayor of the town of Fountain Hills, myself, hereby request the IRC to approve an amendment to the draft map to alter the boundary line between District 4 and District 6 to also include the town and its community neighbors of Rio Verde within the boundaries of District 6. On the map, you'll see, and you're probably familiar because it's probably been a challenge, is that the map uniquely seems to come down and grab Fountain Hills, and it removes us from every one of our neighboring communities. So it's very important for us to remain in those communities of interest that we partner with, and we believe greatly in regionalism, so we would appreciate your strong consideration of realigning Fountain Hills with the district that is the same with our neighbors. Thank you for doing a difficult job.
Thank you, Mayor. Next, I have Ken Hand, representing Self from Tempe.
My name is Ken Hand, H-A-N-D, and I want to thank all the members for taking on this difficult and probably thankless task. The Maricopa County is about 4 times the population of Pima County, so I was a little bit surprised when I saw the members of the committee or the commission were about 60%.
Could you pull that microphone up a bit?
So Pima County has about 60% of the representation. So I thought it might be a benefit for me to provide information being a more than 44-year resident of proposed CD9 continuously. I've lived in the Northeast Phoenix area and all the way to South Tempe. So I've lived in that area for over 44 years, gone to school and worked in that CD area. My issue is really the community interest for the congressional districts in Arizona. Northeast Phoenix, as you know, the CD9 stretches all the way from Northeast Phoenix all the way to Chandler. And Northeast Phoenix is much more a part of North Phoenix or Phoenix than it is, or even Scottsdale, than it is of Tempe, Mesa, and the East Valley. And so I'm not too sure why it would have been spread all the way up that far north. Tempe is also more identified as part of the East Valley with Mesa, Gilbert, Chandler, and so forth. I also will second, or actually you've heard this a number of times, and you just heard it now, of Fountain Hills and Apache Junction being part of the Phoenix metro area. They're much more identified with the Phoenix metro area than cities like Yuma, Bullhead City, and even Colorado City. And I think it's in their best interest, and the residents there know it much better and have said so. My solution is I think Northeast Phoenix should be included in proposed CD 6 or 7, and that's more aligned with their community interest in that area. CD 9 should be expanded east rather than north into Mesa to make up for the Northeast Phoenix being dropped out of that district. CD 5 should be expanded to include Apache Junction, all of Queen Creek, Florence as necessary, Santan, etc. And I think you've heard that from those towns specifically, but I'm just kind of voicing my agreement with those as making those part of that and changing those boundaries. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, I have Pam Whitney, representing LD 18.
Hi, I'm Pam Whitney, P-A-M-W-H-I-T-N-E-Y. Hold on. Okay. One vote, taxation without representation. We need every vote to count. If the political parties in these districts are grossly unbalanced, those people aren't being represented, they aren't being heard. To be fair, we need to have these be competitive. We need it to actually be a true race between the political parties so that we know what a true majority feels about things. And I think that it's important that we try and get it as balanced as we can. That's all.
Thank you. Next is Randy Keating, representing Self from Tempe.
Hi, my name is Randy Keating, R-A-N-D-Y-K-E-A-T-I-N-G, and I'm here tonight to talk to you briefly about competitiveness, but first I'd like to thank you for your public service. It's a thankless job, I know. I've been to a lot of these, taken a lot of abuse, and you're almost done, which I'm sure you're very happy about. Overall, I have mixed feelings about both of these maps, legislative and congressional. I would like to see more competitiveness, particularly in the legislative maps. An example of a district I think that would be a good model would be the new LD 26. Only a few points separate the R's and the D's. A majority of those voters are registered as independents, and it kind of, it's contiguous, it's compact, it respects, for the most part, communities of interest, although I do think that it is a mistake to not include the Tempe Lakes in that district. I lived in the Tempe Lakes for a number of years, and that's just as much part of Tempe as is the university. So I would like to see that included in a future LD for that area. But overall, I think that other legislative districts would do well to be modeled after the new LD 26. As far as the congressional maps, I live in what will be Congressional District 9, and I think that that is another good example of what a competitive district can look like. Again, only a few points separate the D's and the R's. A majority of the voters are registered independents, So it gives us an opportunity to have a real race for our congressman about real issues. If a Republican only has to talk to a Republican and a Democrat only has to talk to a Democrat to win an election, then we don't get anything done. We turn over our democracy then to the special interests that compose our political parties. So the only way to move forward in this country, and I do believe that a vast majority of our problems right now have to do with the polarization of our political parties. I think that the only way to solve that is to make sure that all races for Congress, all races for the state legislature are competitive. Without that, we're just going to have more of the same, no matter who's benefiting. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Amy Kalman, representing Self, from LD 17, or perhaps that was 12.
Not very good handwriting.
Well, I have very poor eyesight.
My name is Amy Kalman, that's A-M-Y. Last name is K-A-L-M-A-N. And I am representing myself here today. Just wanting to tag in a bit on what Mr. Keating just said very eloquently about competitiveness. It's been posited lately that competitiveness in some ways is secondary, or even more than that, tertiary, that somehow it is the last in for any kind of goal that this body should be establishing. And I'd just like to forward you to the language of some of the most recent Arizona Supreme Court redistricting decision that affirmed that competitiveness is as important as communities of interest, is as important as everything except the Voting Rights Act, which must, of course, come first. It says that the direction that competitiveness should be favored unless one of two conditions occurs, and that would be practicality and harming the other goals, substantially harming them, occurs, does not, contrary to the Commission's assertion, mean that the competitiveness goal is less mandatory than the other goals, can be ignored, or should be relegated to a secondary role. The constitutional language means what it says. There have been a lot of outside bodies trying to influence this one, and a lot of rumors, a lot of threats, and a lot of name calling. And I think that's seriously a concern, because this body is supposed to be independent, is supposed to be able to do its job without harassment, and is supposed to be taking competitiveness and making it work within these districts, making it work within the parameters that it has. I very much appreciate that it has been doing so under what I would consider to be horrible political outside attempts at influence. And I would just like to stand up here and affirm that competitiveness need not be feared. Competitiveness could be what saves Arizona from extremism on both sides, rendering it completely impractical to do anything at all. And therefore, your goal, your job here is and has been an extremely important one. I appreciate everything that you and the other members of the commission have done. I have looked at these maps. I think that some of the people who stood up here before me have made very well researched and very poignant points. But on an overarching global level, I would urge this commission to consider that competitiveness also needs to be one of those overarching goals. There are plenty of ways we could tweak something here and there. And then, of course, we have to go back and fix things as far as whether we're complying with the Voting Rights Act. And then we have to fix things as to whether we're complying with population issues, landmarks, things such as this. Don't let competitiveness get lost in the dust. We all are looking not only to have our towns kept together, to have the people that we formed communities with be people that we work with, but to have our system work. And that, above all, is why you are here and why you are so important.
Thank you. Next, I have Jana Granillo, representing Self, from Tempe.
Good evening. I've been here before. My name is Jana, J-A-N-A, Granillo, G-R-A-N-I-L-L-O. I live in Tempe. I'm currently in District 17. And I'm here today to speak again in support of the proposed Congressional District 9. I support what the drawn map is. I do understand, based on comments, that tweaks will be done, and I appreciate that, as long as the prior speaker before me, as her point was made, that there is some competitiveness. When you're looking at the compact Maricopa County, yes, there are communities of interest, but we're all compact. We're pretty close together with very few exceptions. And I think that we have the ability to work together and to collaborate. I have faith in Arizona that we can do that when given the opportunity, but we need that foundation in which to work. As far as the legislative district, the only one that I've looked at is the one where it's going to affect me directly, no surprise, and that would be potentially District 26, Legislative District 26. Again, I'm okay with that. If things get moved, then the competitiveness needs to be there. If things get moved down and over, that's fine by me. If it stays like that, like it is, that's fine. Again, with the competitiveness there. We're very compact in that particular area. And although it doesn't fit my ideal, I need to take in consideration what the impact is of the whole state. And I truly support your efforts in doing so. The other reason that I've come here today is I've told my story before as to why I think competitiveness is so important. And today I come to you with a new story. I was able to go to the hearing in the Capitol last Friday and witness what happens to a participating individual when you have a partisan body. And for me personally, I went there on my own with my own ideas, was allowed to give testimony, and then subjected to questioning that I thought was very leading, and also more like an interrogation versus being able to give testimony like I was here today. I think in that particular hearing there was a tone and a manner that was set, and particularly for the first woman who spoke, who was an African-American woman. And I have to tell you, it took all my courage as a woman of color to get up there and express an opposing viewpoint. And I took it. And I'm here to tell you today that that's unacceptable, so that we can have such partisan politics, and that I hope that Arizona can do better than that, so that citizens like myself, a woman of color, who just simply wants to express an opinion, doesn't get beat up in the process. I appreciate your work that you've done. I can't imagine being in your shoes and going through what you have gone to, what you have been enduring. And I support your efforts. I support your work that you've done for Arizona. I support your ability to make quality decisions and tweak the lines as needed be, so that the whole effect for Arizona is competitiveness and keeping that in balance. And I thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Next is Lauren Kuby, representing self from Maricopa County.
Hello, Lauren Kuby, K-U-B-Y, and from Tempe, a 23-year resident of Tempe, Arizona. And I'd like to speak today also in support of Congressional District 9. I've heard some arguments before the commission that this is not represent a natural community of interest, and I would like to say it actually really does. When you look at the flow of people from the Mesa Community College and ASU Tempe campus to downtown campus, there's been a natural flow in terms of social, academic, economic interests that have been sort of encapsulated by the light rail system. And I think it creates a natural community of interest that seems to be helpful in creating the only competitive district that is in the congressional map. I'd also like to give another example of why I think CD9 is a community of interest. City Council District 6, which is represented now by Council Member Sal DeSicchio, that district is almost entirely within CD9. So that makes a lot of sense, I think. There's a lot of natural community there. And another reason I'd like to give, ASU has a current project now called Energize Phoenix that is funded by the Department of Energy. And the idea behind Energize Phoenix is to create the green rail, to make the light rail, and the communities, the institutions, schools, homes along the light rail as green as possible in terms of a lot of retrofitting of buildings and such. So ASU and the U.S. government saw that that made a natural community of interest that needed to be supported and sort of held up as a model in the state of how we can have a greener economy and a more sustainable community. So those are my reasons why I think CD9 as composed should be kept the way it is. I wish there were more competitive districts within the congressional map. I know you're balancing a lot of criteria there. I also, like Jana, who spoke before me, would like to speak out very strongly against the interference from the governor and the legislature in the proceedings. You're all public servants. You are all volunteers giving enormous amounts of your time. I know my husband was being considered for the to be on the commission, and he withdrew when he realized what kind of commitment we're talking about here. 10 years of your time and countless hours with not much thanks, and I want to salute you for that. But I see all that interference is happening, and I second the experience that Jenna relayed on Friday, because I was there today and found there was a lot of bullying tactics going on. I happen to be the fifth of 6 kids, so I know about bullies, so I felt like I handled myself well in reaction. But in some ways, what the committee that the legislature has put together has done, in some ways it's very poetic, I find, because it reaffirms exactly why we need an independent redistricting commission. It reaffirms that Proposition 106 and the voters' will in 2000 was to keep this out of the hands of the legislature and not to be interfered with. And today I mentioned to the legislators that all their comments could be aimed and directed at the legislative, at one of your many public hearings. There were many opportunities to do that. I spoke with the thousands of people that have given public testimony. And then I sort of paused and thought, oh wait, no, you wouldn't want to do that because that would be seen as interfering with an independent commission, so you're not going to go there. So why are you doing it in this body? So I reaffirm too that you need to continue your constitutional obligation and please continue to protect the will of the voters as expressed in 2000 and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is C.J. Briggle, representing self from Maricopa County.
Thank you. C.J. Briggle, B-R-I-G-G-L-E. And I do applaud the commission for all of your very hard work. We're getting close to the finish line, and I'm confident that feels pretty good on your side. I know it does from ours. We've been diligently following you also, and it's been quite a process. I'm an Arizona resident for over 26 years, and I now live in Ahwatukee, and it is now encompassed in your new map, LD 18. And I approached this commission to tweak just a few map lines in order to make this new LD 18 a truly competitive 50-50 district. If you take the proposed baseline divider and move it north to 60 and move the eastern border west to Dobson, the other districts affected by this map can be easily adjusted with minor line changes either north or further east. And with these changes, our district will be a true 50-50 competitive district at the legislative level. And that's a first for our community. With just a few minor tweaks, our district would be the most competitive in the state and a model for all competitive districts statewide. And with these changes, competition will give each of us a voice in our election process. And that's really what we're all after. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next is Genevieve Vega, representing self. I believe I probably mispronounced your name before. And if you just let us know where you're from.
I'm impressed that you remembered my name after all the people that you guys listen to. Genevieve Vega, G-E-N-E-V-I-E-V-E. Vieve, last name Vega. I just wanted to come in front of the commission again. Thank you very much for your time. I understand this is a really difficult task, and you got a lot of opinions that you have to weigh. Want to just reiterate my previous statement about keeping the integrity of Congressional District 9. I think that's, gosh, one of the only ones that's actually truly competitive, and competitive is such an important step for how we succeed as a state. So, so to please keep the integrity of Congressional District 9. Also to please, I've heard a lot of comments about the different legislative districts, so I'm not going to reiterate any of those. But to again, I notice there's a high deviance from what's ideal as far as competitiveness goes, and want to just state that all the criteria for the different criteria set forth upon the commission to consider when drawing these maps, that they all need to be considered equally. So please do look at the competitiveness of the legislative districts. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. That was the last request to speak form I have. Is there anyone else who would like to address the commission? Maybe one more. Janie Thom, Director of Central Arizona Water Conservation District from Maricopa County.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak, and I apologize for my tardiness. I am elected to represent Maricopa County. It's a county-wide office. I represent Central Arizona Water Conservation District. And you may be more familiar with us. We operate the Central Arizona Project Canal. We take water from the Colorado River and supply it to cities, farms, industry, and we do recharge and replenishment in Maricopa, Pinal, and Pima counties. Our canal is 336 miles long, and to move the water, we are the largest power user in the state. It's very important for us that we have legislators who understand our issues and who are able to deal with water and power in Arizona. And looking at the legislative maps, I see that there's a problem. We have in the state, I'm not sure you're aware of it, what we call active management areas. They were created by the state government in 1980. And those active management areas are in Maricopa, Pinal, and Pima County. And I see that some of these legislative districts combine parts of 2 active management areas and also parts of 2 counties. And I don't think that that really respects the communities of interest and compactness that the Constitution provides that you folks need to go by. Also, as far as communities of interest go, the legislative districts specifically that you have drawn for number 25 and 16, it follows Power Road, and 16 encompasses part of Pinal County, part of Maricopa County, part of Apache Junction, part of Mesa. We're not looking at community of interest here at all. We have a shotgun sort of situation where we have just all kinds of people drawn together into one legislative district. This does not address communities of interest and compactness. We're dealing with several school districts, several cultures, different active management areas, different counties, and I think that returning the dividing line to Meridian Road makes a lot of sense. It does for Central Arizona Water Conservation District, it does for the school districts in Apache Junction and in Mesa, and the communities themselves are quite distinct. Their water issues are different, and I just think that a close review would be in order. And I just want you to think about the communities. School districts are a really, really good definition. It's something that people are always close to, even if they don't have children in school. I know I look at it myself, and my children are grown. So anyway, that is kind of what I had to say. I'm a resident of Mesa, and I'm the only person on my board of directors from the East Valley. So did you have any questions you wanted to ask me?
No, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to address you.
Welcome. We have two more. Allison Shannon, representing self from Tempe.
Hi, Allison Shannon, S-H-A-N-N-O-N. A lot has been said tonight about competitiveness and how important that is in this process and in the political process in general. And I wanted to let you know that I moved to Tempe 4 years ago. And the first thing I did was get involved in the political process in the city where I lived. And why was that important? It was important because the community that I lived in had a competitive political process. And I think that if we think about political participation in our state and the need for people to be involved and all of the dissatisfaction that we currently see, if we encourage political participation by maintaining districts like Legislative District 26 or encouraging districts like 26, Congressional District 9, more people will want to participate. Communities matter to people. And if they feel like they have a stake in their community and the political process that occurs in their community, more people will participate in politics in this state. And I think that we'll have a better political climate for it. So in the interest of maintaining competitiveness and encouraging participation, I encourage you to look at other districts that are maybe skewed towards one political side or the other and rethink those in terms of competitiveness.
Thank you. Next is Donald Savino, representing self from Maricopa County.
My name is Donald Savino, S-A-V as in Victor, I-N-O. This is impromptu. I didn't mean to speak. I just thought I'd broach some subjects that I heard. First, I want to thank you for what the district has done. To be independent has been, I'm sure, incredibly difficult. There's so many special interests that are vying for attention that I can't believe. Today, if you haven't heard, you've been sued by just about everybody who's a Republican, including Governor Brewer. So I wouldn't want your job for anything. Competitiveness, which has been brought out by a huge number of people here today, seems to be the topic that most people are concerned about, because that's what gives us our opportunity to speak. What is it about competitiveness that people don't get? I know that by just looking at the numbers, getting the districts numerically as close as possible as you did is tremendous compared to the way it's been before. Astounding. And I'm sure that was incredibly difficult to do, but competitiveness is probably the most important thing that can be done. There's all these criteria, none are more important other than the FAIR Act. Competitiveness, as far as the rest of us are concerned, is probably number one. It really is. In that case, reason rules. People can make their choice based on how they feel. They don't have to just vote because that's your party, and then once that person gets in there, especially in this area, that automatically gets them elected. So the most extremisms rule, and we need to get beyond that. So that's my point. Competitiveness.
Thank you. Next is Glenn Gaddy, representing self from Mesa.
I came here just to listen. First of all, thank you for
allowing me to speak, Vice Chair Freeman. America basically came together as a group of individuals and people who had like ideals. When they didn't like the ideals of the people they were with, they shifted and made other communities and even states. Competitiveness, to me, is another word for trying to take a community or an area and make it different than what it is. I've lived in the same area for 30 years. I chose to raise my kids there. I like my neighbors. I like how they think. I like how they vote. I like my representative. And I would hate to see that change into something where I have to go to battle with people that differ. So I don't see competitiveness as something that's anything but very divisive. Okay, I live in a district where we are very divided right now. It's ugly. And if that's competitiveness, then I'd rather not participate. But I hope you'd keep that in consideration, that we live, I think we heard that tonight. We have people in rural that want to stay rural because that's their community. It's what they're comfortable with. They want representatives from that area. They don't want to have representatives from other things. And that's how I feel, and appreciate your time.
Thank you. Well, once again, that was the last request to speak form. Is there anyone else who would like to address the commission? Going once, going twice. Did you, I'd ask that you please fill out a reform if you haven't already. Well, after you make your comments, you can fill. No, go ahead and make your comments. But state your name and spell it.
My name is Bill Kilgore, Kilgore. And it's just interesting hearing all this because I've read some on it, and I've had a lot of friends that have varied opinions on it, and I've written a letter. But this competitive, I guess, I'm not too sure I understand what that is. But I do know the community aspect. And I moved into a community in Tempe, and it's not quite the same community it was when I lived there. It's competitive. The high schools are more competitive. There was 2 high schools, no problem. But I didn't leave the community. But different people moved in, we got along together, and we voted. But we elected our representative from our area based on who lived there. So I guess my whole thing as I listen to what's being said here, and I've thought about it, is if I don't like it, I'm going to move. But I'm helping to elect a person from our community based on what I think the interests are for our community, and the people there are voting. So I believe we should be deciding, not the state or commission deciding on rural over here, joining this section over here. It looks like a mismatch. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. And when I heard the rural people express their desires, but boy, do I empathize with all of you and what you're doing. It's not an easy task, and I do commend you on it. I'll live here anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. 2 more? Mike Conway, representing self from Mesa.
Mike Conway, Mikeconway. Was not planning on speaking. I don't have anything prepared, so hopefully I will not ramble. Competitiveness to me must be approached equally based on the Arizona Supreme Court decision above the same as everything except the Federal Voting Rights Act. I'm somewhat perplexed that the people who seem to be from the party, mostly Republicans, are afraid of competitiveness. It has been a mantra my entire life, growing up in the era of Reagan and forward, that Republicans believe that competitiveness drives everything to a better level. I'm a school teacher. I get the idea of competitiveness in schools improving the outcome of kids learning. Competitiveness works. Republicans claim that public service workers must be privatized because competitiveness will improve the product. What is it about competitive districts that Republicans are afraid of? If competition reaps a better product in the end, competitive districts should reap better politicians in the end, which represent all the people, not special interest and not just one faction way to the right or way to the left. Be true to yourselves. You promote competition in all aspects of our life, except when it comes to competitive districts. I want to thank you for your time, but I do not think you have succeeded. When you guarantee one political party, no matter which one it is, a hold on 50% of the districts or legislative seats, you've failed. Go back, do your job like the voters wanted you to do when they passed this. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Burke, representing self from Mesa.
My name is Bob Burke. I spelled B-O-U-R-K-E. I want to thank the commissioners for their time, dedication, and putting up with a lot of aggravation. Competition is what makes America work in capitalism and in the exchange of ideas and in the free market of politics. Choices and options have always brought out the best solutions as people choose by voting on the ballot, as they choose by putting their money with ideas and products that work for them at the time. C-O-M-P-E-T-I-T-I-O-N. I don't know how the maps reflect the competition statistically. Now, as far as community of interest, I know Mesa, having lived here for about, in the downtown area for about 6.5 years, minor changes could be made based on the housing I see, but it is relatively fair and representative based on what I see in the housing stock in the area. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? All right then. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. The commission holds a hearing tomorrow night in Safford, and I get to have that enjoyable drive out to Safford tomorrow. And then on Friday, we are in Nogales, I believe, and Saturday in Yuma. And then there are hearings. I don't believe there's a hearing scheduled on Monday, but hearings for the rest of that week. And you can go to azredistricting.org, and the entire schedule is on there. And I'm saying that because I don't remember all the, I know we're in Scottsdale, Peoria, South Phoenix, Casa Grande, and a few other, Cottonwood, and a few other places. Anyway, thank you for your comments. Your comments are very important. As many of the commissioners said, when the draft maps were adopted, that they were drafts, and that I think it's incumbent upon all the commissioners to take all the public comments into account and apply the 6 constitutional criteria and make whatever adjustments are appropriate to these maps before we get to the final maps. So what we've done here tonight is important to that process, so I thank you. And with that, it is 7:26 p.m., and I declare the meeting adjourned.